This week, Julian Assange notched a rare win in his legal battle against the United States, with a high court in the UK ruling that he is able to appeal the U.S. extradition and also dealing a blow to some of the U.S. efforts to make assurances about the conditions that he would be kept in if he were to be brought back to the United States. To talk more about this, we're joined by Julian Assange's brother, filmmaker Gabriel Shipton. Gabe, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so tell us, so you were at the hearing on Monday. What were your expectations going into it? And what was the tone of it? How'd you feel about the result?
Well, for us, as Julian's family, going into this hearing where they could have turned around and ordered his extradition, there were some people saying there were actually...
From there, basically.
Yes, yeah. There were some people saying there were US Marshals in the court, even ready to pounce. So going in there, there's a lot of... It's very tense, very tense for us. And this decision obviously was a huge relief, that Julian lives to fight another day in this ongoing extradition proceeding. The mood in the court, I think, was a bit different. The judges are sort of taking on the gravity of what this means, not just for Julian, but what it means for freedom of expression in the United Kingdom. And they spoke to that when they rejected this US assurance from the DOJ, from the State Department, that said that Julian could seek to rely on the First Amendment, but they wouldn't guarantee a First Amendment that would apply to Julian. And so the UK courts actually rejected that assurance and said that that's not good enough because what that would mean for citizens in the United Kingdom is that these secrecy laws, these espionage laws, could be used potentially to suppress the freedom of expression of people in the United Kingdom. So that's a huge rebuke to the DOJ, to the State Department. I think quite embarrassing as well on the world stage, having a diplomatic note rejected in that fashion.
He could say that again?
He could seek to rely on a First Amendment defence.
You can seek to rely on the First Amendment.
Yeah.
But you can't have actual First Amendment protections.
Yes.
You can try.
Yeah. Well, you can give it a go.
Well, anybody's allowed to try.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and Gabe, I was going to say, if we keep pulling at that thread, from the position of the UK, there's a serious question about free expression in journalism. And I wanted to see if you could explain just a little bit more what Ryan was just saying. You can seek the protections of the First Amendment sort of hypothetically, but what are they talking about practically? That would mean if you're in the UK reporting on things that the United States security apparatus is unhappy with, they can, do what they will if they become unhappy with it. Is that kind of what's going on here?
That's right. And if these judges had have accepted that assurance, that's exactly what it would mean for all journalists in the United Kingdom, that they wouldn't actually have free expression rights in their home country because the US DOJ could use its espionage laws to reach into the United Kingdom and go after any journalists. And the judges actually acknowledged the gravity in court. They said, this has massive meaning, not just for Julian, but for all the people in the United Kingdom. So I think it really frames now the next appeal as a freedom of expression case, which haven't really been done in Julian's case for a long time. And I think that's going to have repercussions back here in Washington, because I don't think the DOJ ever really wanted to have a freedom of expression case going on this case.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. The DOJ wanted to prosecute one of the most important publishers and journalists of the last 15 years, but they somehow thought that they could do that without getting into a debate over freedom of expression and the free press, that they could just talk about hacking and cyber this and cyber terrorism. I think it's like Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden have referred to him. But yeah, that was always ridiculous because that's not what it's about. And so, how has the public, and when I mean public, I mean public officials that you're meeting with on a regular basis, how has their reception of the case evolved over the last year or so?
Well, there's a lot more room now to hear Julian's perspective on this case. This perspective that I bring as Julian's brother to Washington, and I think I've been here every month for the last 3 months for a week, working away in Congress, and the amount of attention that we get, the amount of meetings we get is just increasing exponentially. People very high up, in the Congress who hold these high positions are willing to hear a different perspective now, which would never have been possible. And just last month, you had President Biden. He was asked, is he considering the Australian request to drop the charges? And he said, yes, we're considering it. And so even at the highest levels, you've got the Biden administration saying we're considering dropping this, but the DOJ is pushing forward. So there's this sort of, a little bit of a divide between the institutions here that I think shows some movement in the case, and we're here to make sure that Julian's perspective is carried through into the Congress.
Well, and on that point about Biden saying, yes, I'm making this consideration, I'm also curious, Gabe, about how geopolitical negotiations might be changing the way some people are thinking about this. Ally in Australia, obviously an ally, as China hawks are increasingly concerned about Taiwan, increasingly concerned about that whole area of the world. Is there any sense that you get as you're talking to members that they see Julian as a chip kind of in the way that they're looking at negotiations with this hugely powerful ally, that they're concerned or that they want to be sort of a hedge in a potential conflict with China? Just trying to think of why over the course of the last year, people might be more interested in having that conversation.
Yeah, certainly. And I think if you look back into the reporting that's going on around the alliance in Australia, Julian's always mentioned whenever there's an alliance discussion and how that is a reflection of Australia's true position in the alliance, that the human rights of Australians don't actually matter within this sort of alliance structure. And carrying that through into the meetings on the Hill, obviously members who are more concerned about foreign relations, it really carries with them, it does. And we had a group of politicians here from Australia, bipartisan group last year, and they were, they made an incredible impact in terms of explaining to Congress people what's actually happening back in Australia and the sentiment among the Australian public, because 90% of the Australian public wants Julian brought back, and it's having a detrimental effect on the alliance because it's like one point of contention really in the alliance between the US and Australia.
It's a really incredible statement about how desperately the US wants Julian Assange behind bars here in the United States, that they are willing to upend their relationship with Australia when they keep claiming they're doing this pivot to Asia and the Pacific, and willing to upend their relationship with the UK.
And double down on a Trump-era prosecution.
And double down on a Trump-era prosecution. Do you have a sense, and you have the president himself saying, you know what, actually we're open to dropping this in our talks with Australia, which takes it out of the DOJ. Like, that was an unusual thing for him to say, because typically a Democratic president will say, we don't get involved in Justice Department matters. Right. Actually, that day I asked, you may have seen this, I asked the State Department, I was like, you always refer questions to the Department of Justice on Julian Assange. But today the president said he was talking to Australia about it. So you can't, so it's now diplomatic. It's now in your domain. And they did, then they finally commented on it and had a back and forth, claimed why it was a legit prosecution. Because it brings it out of that realm of, this is just prosecutors kind of doing their work. But what is your sense of what is the impulse here? Like, why is it so fanatically necessary for them to pursue this in the face of all of the kind of political obstacles and problems that it's causing for them around the world?
Yeah, well, I think there is a division. And so you've seen Biden making these comments, as well as all the press freedom organisations writing to the president, as well as the New York Times calling on the president to drop it. So I think there is a division between those who want to pursue this prosecution, the sort of Mike Pompeos of the world, the sort of hubris from these sorts of characters within the intelligence community, and those people who see it as a sort of albatross, political albatross around their necks. So I think there is a division forming, and I think the political costs now, we're reaching a point where the political cost of pursuing this actually outweighs the benefit of dropping it, particularly after this decision in the UK courts, where the UK has actually said, we're not going to accept your assurances. This is going to affect the freedom of expression of all people in the UK. I think that is a really strong rebuke, and that will feed into the cost of pursuing this and hopefully shift the balance so that the DOJ can take another look at it and say, well, actually, maybe it's not worth us pursuing this. It's incredibly embarrassing. It's affecting our relationships. It might be time to bring it to
The next
close.
step is that he will file an appeal, and then the question will be, does the Department of Justice respond to the appeal? Or what? Yeah,
They'll set an appeal date now, and that appeal will be based on these freedom of expression questions. The appeal will be, I think that it's going to move quite quickly. They've got 4 days to submit schedules and things like that, and then the court will set an appeal date. So Julian's lawyers are expecting an appeal date even before the summer. So there could be another hearing before the summer break in August. But then whether that result comes back before November, I'm not sure. Yeah.
And could that appeal result in his release?
Potentially, if the appeal, if it goes Julian's way and they, it would block the extradition, and then it would be up to the DOJ again to say, okay, we're going to take this to the Supreme Court of the UK. So that could be a perfect, neat endpoint for the DOJ just to say, oh yeah, this has gone on too long. This is too hard.
Like we lost. Let's move on.
Yeah, and it's the UK's fault. We can blame the UK. We still pursued it as much as we could, but the UK courts blocked us.
And you mentioned November. Do you feel like there's a race against the clock? Are you worried that the Pompeos of the world are coming back to power? It's hard to imagine a worse situation than the current administration, which has been prosecuting him for all these years.
Yes, that's right.
But maybe there is a worse situation. I don't know. Where do you come down on that?
Well, I think what's happened with the Australian advocacy, which has been very, very important in this case, and Biden saying, the president saying that he's considering dropping it, I think now is the time to really move and to end this right now. We don't know what's going to happen after November. What administration will be sworn in January. So I think now is the time to really make the best move to end this based on the president's comments, the support from Australia and the UK court decision.
They're like a dog with a bone.
Yeah. Last question. How is he doing mental health-wise? I know it's just absolute torture to be in the conditions that he's in. How is he faring?
Yeah, he's holding up. Obviously it's a lot of relief now that he's got sort of
path.
Yeah, a little bit of a glimmer of hope and a path to keep fighting, because that's what it is. He's not been extradited. We can keep fighting. We can keep mounting this political pressure. But he's hanging in there. His health is deteriorating. I'll go and see him next week after I leave here. So. He's hanging in there. He was telling me the other day he's in prison there's an actual cannibal who's been put into the prison with him. So these are the sorts of people that he has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. These extreme criminals, the most violent criminals, predatory criminals in the United Kingdom, who he's sharing a jail with.
Well, thanks as always for joining us, and good luck on Capitol Hill today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.